The people who walk through our doors, they're being chased by a tiger. It may just take us a little time to see it, but when we do, compassion comes forth. Some fuller understanding of why in the world life would have gone the way it has gone for them.
Well, if you know anything about Rockford Rescue Mission, you know that this place operates on volunteers. There's a staff here, of course. So there's professional staff that works here, but volunteers really make this place run. And we have one of those with us today, Dr. Rick Meyer. So, Rick, thank you for being with us. You're a retired counselor and pastor. Not really retired as a counselor, are you? Because you're doing some of that work here.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about what you're doing here at the mission and maybe how you arrived here.
Yeah, well, I started into a season of life where I had more time, and I started to look around for some area where I could make a contribution, and draw upon my skills, my background. I had known about Rockford Rescue Mission at early in my life because my parents did some volunteer work here. I had a really good feeling about it. It was the first place I thought of. And so I called up. They said, hey, we've got what we call a CEO tour coming up, where Sherry Pitney, the CEO, would take us around, share the history. Well, she's doing that. One of the things that really stood out to me was that they have a number of professionals in the community who volunteer their time. I mean, a dentist, a chiropractor, just on and on the list goes, right? And I thought, that is just the coolest thing. That's what I would love to do. But I just tucked it back here. I didn't know what to do with that. So there's a period of time when we could talk with one another. I talked with Sherry, and she heard about my background. I said, could you make use of someone like me?
And she said, of course, no, we don't have any use
for it. Sherry.
Yeah.
She says, you would be an answer to prayer.
Yeah.
I thought.
Of course.
Oh, great. Now I really have to take this.
It's a lot of responsibility,
What have you just stepped into? Yeah.
So she got me together with the director of the residential program, and we talked and kind of went through a vetting process, and then he said, let's go. And I said, okay. And I've been loving it ever since.
Just a little background. Is Rockford home for you?
It actually is. I grew up here, and when I graduated from high school, I moved away. I've been away for 40 years, and never thought I'd be moving back here.
Everyone says that.
I know. I've been a number of places my career's taken me, and my parents were back here, and my dad was going through, sort of the latter stages of his life, and I wanted to be close. So I made a move here, and I ended up staying. So,
yeah.
There it goes.
So for being a counselor and a minister just in your before retirement time,
Mm-hmm.
what was the idea that brought you into ministry? What was that initial prompting to pursue that?
Very naive prompting. I was young in the faith, and there were a couple of people I looked up to who, along the way, suggested I might consider ministry. And I didn't really know what that meant. The only thing I saw that was very visible was a pastoral ministry. So I thought, okay, I guess that's it. And there's the naivete.
Didn't know what you were getting yourself into.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, we don't really have a clue. And so even when I was at the seminary, and I was taking a course in preaching. And they said, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "Yeah. What if you're scared to death?" And they went, "Well, I think it'll get better for you as time goes on." That was it. Well,
Did it?
yes and no. I always had a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety and all that around it. So, but once I got there in that spot, I fairly enjoyed it. But there were other things I didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
But the thing that I knew I wanted to do was the counseling. It just kept coming back. And so I went ahead. I went through the MDiv program, and then I went on for a doctorate in pastoral counseling. And, that's where I got to do, my practicum and really get into the work of what that looks like. And if you don't mind me sharing, I just, how I kind of sorted through drawing upon the learnings from sociology and psychology and all that, and my faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept looking for the opportunity to really integrate those two.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that many theologians have recognized that God has given us two books. And the first book is creation. And the second book is scriptures. And that first book of creation, we're told, declares the glory of God, right? Firmament shows forth and speaks forth his handiwork. And so we're really, there's sort of a calling there to really pay attention to creation. And we can learn a lot, even about God, by studying creation. And we can learn a lot about ourselves. And we can put that in different categories like psychology and sociology and psychotherapy and, neurobiology, and the list goes on, and draw upon the best of that. And then the scriptures, where we learn our faith, and bring those two together. I mean, my learning was to bring them together. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, provide a firm foundation for people. And, we've got people who've gone through different programs. Some have been, non-faith oriented and just, psychotherapy. Others have been just faith oriented, prayer and being in the Word and mm-hmm. so forth. And people really gain from both of those. But what I find is when you can put the two together, they support one another. It's just richer. It's a deeper kind of foundation.
People's typical view of counseling, I think, comes from, that movies, TV shows. Like, I remember when I was a kid seeing Larry the Cucumber sitting down on like a leather couch and then another vegetable talking about their feelings together. For you and in counseling, is that a true perspective of what that is like? Since you've probably interviewed
I don't know. The only thing that goes through my mind is Larry saying, "I love my lips."
But is that like a true perspective of a you mentioned great things about like creation and his word being
right,
the guiding principles of your counseling.
I've never had anyone lie down on a couch.
Okay, so it's nothing like that.
I mean, that's a very Freudian approach, and hey, we've learned a lot from Freud and those who followed, but yeah, never have taken that approach. But that doesn't mean we don't get fully into, family history and mm-hmm. exploring relationships with parents and so forth.
Yeah, so like paint a picture of what like a counseling session looks like with you. What does that environment look like or feel like? Do you, I imagine it's a lot of questions from your perspective.
Yes.
But how does that type of thing work here?
So kind of a typical counseling session, there are sort of stages, and a lot of that depends on where the person is coming in. But one of the foundational pieces that just has to be there is really building a relationship of trust and making it a safe place where they feel seen, heard, understood, loved. That's something that it's likely they've never had in their life. And so I have that in my mind, before anything else. And that's foundational all the way through. And so from that point on, then, I kind of have to do some history taking. We talk about family and stuff, and get at what are some of the key components that were drivers for their addiction, because addiction is far and away usually a huge part of their life coming in here. But the other thing that we've learned over the years is that most people, 99% of people who've been full on in the throes of addiction have experienced a significant trauma early in their life. I have to take a trauma-informed approach.
Yeah.
And we do address trauma. And it's so important that we understand what occurs during that trauma. And there are just different degrees and variations on trauma, of course. But we have someone tell you that they were abandoned as a young child. And you have someone who tells you that people were in and out of their life all the time. They didn't have secure attachment. They didn't have anyone there who would walk alongside of them and could put their hand on their back or shoulder and say, it's going to be all right. You're going to be all right. You're going to get through this. Never had that consistent person in life. I know that. And so when I see how they've dealt with that, there are some sort of predictable things that happen. A person who's gone through trauma, and we're talking, physical, sexual abuse, mental, emotional, again, the abandonment kind of stuff comes to play. That's a big thing. Well, first of all, they learn to live in fear. As a young person, what do you have? You're afraid. You don't even have a language for that. Mm-hmm. But what happens is it affects your brain, your nervous system, and even muscle memory. And there are things that take shape there, and you get sort of wired in a certain way that really sets you up for addiction. Because those horrible things don't go away. And what you learn is that you need to find a way to self-medicate. Now, they don't have that language, right? Mm-hmm. But they're looking for a way to get some relief. Tap that stuff down. It never goes away, even though you can tap it down. You can try to drown it out. You can try to numb it. And there are ways to do that, right? Drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, you just name it. And they do that, and it gets pseudo relief. It's like, whew, okay. And till that starts to go away, they got to do that again and again and again. And it doesn't take too long before they're in a vicious cycle that little by little destroys their life. This is the kind of stuff we got to pay attention to.
So this is pretty relevant not only for people who are residents here at the mission, but probably most of our culture right now, right?
Yes.
So I'm guessing you're not seeing, you're seeing maybe more dramatic impact of some of this here, but tell me, are you seeing that, or is it pretty much standard across the board?
There are sort of degrees and variations, and some people have support systems that give them additional opportunities, or they find people who are willing to sort of take responsibility for them and not force them to deal with this stuff. One of the best things that can happen is for there to be someone in their life who will say, give them an ultimatum and say, it's this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes that's the thing that will bring them here.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest that there are lots more people who could be coming into this program who would benefit, sort of get to your point.
Mm-hmm.
We've had young and old. We've had homeless and non-homeless. We've had people with a whole variety of backgrounds. And I would suggest that there are more people, as I said, who don't have to be homeless. They don't have to have the sort of stereotypical picture of a residential program here, and that they would benefit. We're starting to see some of that. I'm happy to say, and it's a huge blessing. So, just to put that.
Do you find that it's relatively easy to draw some of this out of people as you're counseling, for them to come to recognition that, oh, this is why this all happened, or does it take some coaching, for lack of a better word, to kind of get them to understand that? I know it's different with every person. But.
It is, and I can't emphasize enough about that, the foundational relationship of respect and honoring them. I tell people, I said, every person who walks through that door, I have a profound respect for. And not only that, but I'll say, do you know why I'm here? Well, I don't know. I'll say, because I need to be here. Because I'm going to learn from you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to help me. And so I'm listening. I'm paying attention. And it's real, man. I mean it. And so there's a sense in which there's a respect that goes both ways there. And I like it that way. And I think it's honoring to do that. And as we go through, to get to your point, there are different, we call them techniques, or different kinds of pictures. I like to draw pictures. And I'm very picture oriented, right?
Uh-huh.
So you'll bring them in, and they'll engage with that material, and along the way, they'll begin to make some connections. And as more I learn about their story, I can ask more questions that pertain to their story, and making those connections. So, that's kind of the way it comes out, and this stuff does. It gradually comes out. It's not just the main front and center thing. There's a lot of discussion in the field about, do you ask a person to recount their traumas, right? I don't want to re-traumatize them. And I really have a lot of respect for that conversation. And at the same time, it's important, as they're comfortable, to at least talk about the highlights, the main basic elements of it, and how that comes into play.
Because in a lot of cases, they've never verbalized this, right?
In a lot of cases, that's right.
Yeah.
And I'll have residents who will turn to me and say, I've never told anyone this before.
Yeah.
And at that point, once again, I feel honored.
Well, you've almost crossed a bridge, haven't you? Because, wow, if we've reached a point where they're telling you something they've never told anybody,
Yeah.
one, there's an element of trust to that, but two, there's some healing that starts to happen.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about this program is that I'm in a team ministry. We're doing this together. I know that there are multiple people who, in their positions, are speaking life into these people, and that they're taking classes, they're getting advocacy time, and where they go over a lot of material. They learn, they receive psychoeducation,
Yeah.
right? But they also we have a pastor on staff who takes them through the scriptures, and so they learn this too, and that comes out in some of their other classes as well. But I find that when they come to me, I'm not alone in that room, and I like that. I've never had anything quite like it before. That I can know that we're reinforcing one another, and they're getting this stuff coming from a number of directions, and they grow into it. And they'll sometimes along the way they'll come in and they'll use the language. They didn't have that language before. They learned that in one of the classes, right? Well,
I've said this before, maybe even on the podcast, but when I interview people who have gone through the program successfully here, and I know some relapse, and that's part of this, but those who come through successfully, I find them to be emotionally healthier than a lot of the people I know who aren't here.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, the ability to really attend to some of those harsh realities of life. And, there's a certain humility that comes with this whole process. And we don't learn. We don't learn really all that God has for us unless we go through humility. That's where we do our best learning. So we just need to respect that. And those who have been able to really attend to it, you're right, emotionally, they become stronger. And they know where their weaknesses are too, and they can name them.
Yeah.
So, many of us don't have a clue about that.
There's a shame thing about naming those weaknesses, isn't there? Do you have to get over that, or does there remain an element of shame to that when you talk about it?
Yeah. Well, you're taking us on in here, aren't you? I don't know how deep you want to go with this.
I'm interested.
But that is part of that vicious cycle I'm talking about. And, sometime maybe we can talk about parts language and how we discuss how we're made up of different parts. And different parts learn to take on different roles early in life. And then we have to deal with that later. And it's part of what they're dealing with. So maybe they have the voice of a critic because of someone, maybe a parent who was just hypercritical, and their life was out of control. And they were angry, and there was a lot of fear associated with that. And the person was young, and when this stuff is going on, or you have abandonment, a young person internalizes all that. And without the language for it, they just assume there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
So I like to make a distinction between guilt and shame. Guilt is where we feel bad about something we've done or we haven't done, and it's a good thing. We need that. We all need that. Shame is different. Shame is when we feel bad about who we are in the core of our being. And that's something God never intended for us to have. And so we begin to peel back all those layers and get to the core of who they are, who God created them to be. And that in that process, you're dealing with shame, and you're replacing that with God's heavenly love through his Son. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is, and you've probably had this experience before too, but to have somebody come in and say, Rick, I've just learned for the first time that I'm a child of God, and that God loves me, and that I have value. I had no idea. Well, that's shame-based, right? Mm-hmm. Plus, they didn't have the information. They didn't know. No one had maybe shared with them the gospel before. So they're sharing this, and then they'll turn us sometimes and say, I'm going to be baptized next week. Do you want to come? And I'm going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I live for this. This is what I so want for you.
I was going to ask you, related to that, how has working with residents here changed your own faith?
Yeah. Well, it keeps me in touch with my own weaknesses. I'm 27 years sober this year. I know, no matter how far chronologically I get away from that I still have a part of me that knows that if I take one drink, that equals 6.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a different way of doing math. 1 equals 6. 2 means you're just all full on. We tell ourselves it's going to be 1 or 2 because the first person we lie to is ourselves. And once you lie to yourself, well, it's open season online to everybody because it's the only way that you can get through it and live the kind of life you're living. So, did I answer your question? How's it changed my life?
Yeah, I mean, I think partially you did. I'm interested just to hear as you encounter stories of success and failure or success and not yet success here, how does that impact you spiritually? Your background is certainly a part of all this, but just day to day, what's that like?
It does draw me into a time of prayer that's different from what I would be drawn to otherwise. It's more intensely focused. Now, I'm focusing on the residents here. God, what's the next step? What do they need? But as I'm doing that, God is saying, He's ministering to me and He's teaching me, the best way that they can learn how to love is for you to teach them how you've learned to love. So, first command is what? Greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So we start with God. And then it says, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that's a really important move that was made there. Because what it's saying is we can only love another as well as we understand love for ourselves. And when we don't have good, healthy love for ourselves before God, we don't do so well in our relationships either. That's constantly reinforced for me. So this is my journey too.
Yeah.
It's not, like I said, there's a reason why I'm here too.
It's wonderful. I bring it up just to kind of make the point for anyone listening who might be thinking about volunteering here. You think, well, this is to help people who are less fortunate than me, and it absolutely is. But almost universally, people who volunteer here say, this changed my life.
Right. Right. Now you're taking me to a place that I like to go because I get to share a story.
Yeah.
And the story that I want to share with you is very much related to what I see as misunderstandings in the larger community about the people who come through our program.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll hear in various forms, I'll hear people say, well, these are people who they've made poor choices. And now they're experiencing the consequences of their choices. Mm. And I say, yes, but it's not that simple. Mm-hmm. Right? And I want to tell them about the not that simple part, because they're right. They're making poor choices.
But it's a way we can talk ourselves into feeling superior as well, I think. And like you said, you get to some of the causes behind those choices, and it's very complicated. And
it is
certainly not just a matter of deciding one day I'm going to do something terrible.
Especially when you keep in mind that trauma base that sets them up. And so I want to share a story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I want you to imagine, because this is helpful, I think. I want you to imagine that you're with a loved one and you're walking down the sidewalk in downtown Rockford. And as you're walking, all of a sudden, coming around the corner, there's a man who's running and he's yelling, "Ah! Ah!" And he just keeps doing that. He's running hard, and he's coming toward you. And so you grab your loved one, you try to go for cover and get his, you just don't want him to hurt you. You don't know what. It's out of his mind, this guy's crazy. And and then all of a sudden he passes by. You breathe a sigh of relief, and you look back and you see him. He's continuing to go down the road like this. And people are kind of doing the same thing I was doing. And we're afraid. And so my goodness, what are you thinking of that man? I'm thinking, he's a guy to stay away from. This is scary stuff. Well, finally you turn around and you're walking the same direction you were before. And then all of a sudden around that corner comes a huge lion. And he's running hard, and he's coming right for you, and you're, oh my gosh, you just don't want him to stop and have lunch on you. You know what I'm saying? So this is scary. And you pull back away, and then you notice, as you turn around, that he's chasing the guy who was just running. Ah! And my question is, now how do you look at that man? Mm-hmm. Now how do you see him, right? I mean, I think I would act much the same way if I had a large tiger chasing me, right? It seems very normal to me. And I just want to make sure that guy gets some help. What I would say about this is the people who walk through our doors, they're being chased by a tiger. It may just take us a little time to see it. But when we do, compassion comes forth. Some fuller understanding of why in the world life would have gone the way it has gone for them. Now, the tiger is the effects of each person's trauma and the compounded traumas that have occurred following that. Because once you go into a life of addiction, there are multiple traumas associated with that, because you start losing things that are really important to you. You lose your house, you lose your job, you lose your wife, you lose your family, you've burned all your bridges. Nobody, they're all standing back. They're afraid. Mm. They don't know what to do. And they've maybe learned a little bit about that tiger, but they don't really fully know. So it's important, I think, for people to understand that there's a tiger chasing every single one. And they're running scared. And I mean, running is what we do. You know, there's fight, flight, freeze. We're out of here every time, right? And self-medicating and abusing is a form of running. You're taking cover, right? And that's just part of the course as well. It's part of what we learn. They probably learned at a very early age.
So what is it about trauma that is so impactful at a young age? Is it like we see it in all different levels of intensity, but is it the consistency at a young age that to the people you work with? Is it that creates a worst case scenario, or what's the balance there that you found?
Yeah. Yeah, you can get into, you know, what is trauma for one person? Would that be trauma for another, or would they handle it differently, or what are the degrees and so forth? And what we find, and we're talking about young ages, and we're talking about really hard stuff. You know, age 4, and you're watching your mother walk away. She doesn't even turn around and say goodbye. She just leaves, and you never see her again. It's profound.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really profound. We don't understand it as profound as it is, but it will have a profound effect upon us. And I just another couple of examples. You know, here you are, 12 years old, and you watch your uncle stab a man in the rear end with a knife, because he was a different color than him. Okay, what do you do with that? Well, you're in fear. Or you have a dad who comes home drunk and angry, and you're his target. And you're running to hide. And you're afraid. And all you can tell yourself is one day, when I'm big enough, when I'm strong enough, I'm going to shut him down. And so that's your relationship that you have with that parent. And at the same time, you're so conflicted because you love them too. Because it's your dad. There's always a love for your dad, for your mom. So again, with other forms of abuse. And this really does, we call it a rewiring of the brain function. And if you break that down, we can talk about lower brain, middle brain, higher brain. Well, the higher brain is the executive function. That's where you step back, you consider consequences, you think about, this probably won't go well, I'm not going to do that. When you grow up as a young person who's been significantly traumatized, you don't have the luxury of getting to the executive, okay? You don't get to sit back because you're living in fear.
It's emergency.
It's all emergency. You're at the amygdala level, and that gets hijacked. That's the fight, flight, freeze kind of stuff, and that's where you go. And the next level, the hippocampus, is where you have memory and emotion, and those two go together profoundly. And when your memories are mostly bad, and you feel bad about that, guess what it's gonna keep coming up for you in your life. And you can't just push that stuff away. We try so hard to push it away, and we can't. We gotta find a way to deal with it, but most of us, we don't grow up with a language for that, especially if you're a man. We're not taught a language for that kind of stuff. So a lot of men suffer in some significant other ways too.
Rick, is there anything we haven't talked about that you would love to cover? Because this has been great, and we've gotten fairly deep into the world of counseling here, so it's been fascinating.
Yeah, actually, this is great. I really appreciate this time, you guys. Thank you for what you're doing.